In this module, we'll continue our whirlwind tour of several systems with the visual system. So the learning objectives for this chapter, for chapter 21, I want you to be able to list the primary functions of the visual system. They are pretty straightforward. I want you to know what the objectives of eye movements are. I want you to be able to write a brief description of the vestibulo-ocular reflex, what it does, brief being the key word there, and I want you to be able to describe the etiology, pathology, signs, and symptoms of two different visual disorders, bitemporal hemianopsia and homonymous hemianopsia. So we'll talk about what each one of those are. Visual system. This is primary functions of the visual system. It provides sight. Number one. You probably could have guessed that one. It provides processing of visual information, in other words, recognition and location of objects, control of eye movement, and it provides information used in postural and limb movement control. So I always say to people in the clinic, I probably say this every day, you have three sensory inputs to balance vision, vestibular, and somatosensory, or eyes, ears, and feet is the way I say it. And so if your visual system is not giving you the information that you need because it's either dark or you have your eyes closed or you have some sort of visual disturbance, it's going to affect your balance. So the information is with sight, it's conveyed from the retina to the cerebral cortex. So the visual pathway begins with cells in the retina that encode light signals into neural signals. So they convert light into neural signals. It's really super cool how they do it. I took a neurology class with someone who's an expert on vision systems. He went into incredible detail on how it works. We're not going to do that, but it's fascinating and amazing. But the signals are processed within the retina and they're conveyed to the retinal output cells. Retinal output is conveyed by axons that travel in the optic nerve. They go to this little path that's called the optic chiasm where the nerves cross over, and the optic tract, which goes to the occipital lobe in the cerebral cortex, and they all synapse in the lateral genticulate nucleus of the thalamus. You don't really need to know that, but remember all the sensory information coming from the body. In order to have crude awareness, it has to go through the thalamus. The visual information, the sight information, goes through the thalamus as well. So the thalamus is hugely important for processing sensory information. So the optic nerve is the bundle of axons that pass from the retina to the optic chiasm. Nerves merge at the optic chiasm where some axons cross the midline and some don't. Some stay on the same side. The optic tract conveys visual information from the chiasm to the lateral genticulate. So this diagram from the book, it shows that half of the left, information that ends up on the left side of the brain comes from the right visual field and half of it comes from the left visual field, and then vice versa with the other side. So you can see that some of the information from the right eye stays on the right side and some of it crosses over to the other side. And some of the information from the left side stays on the left side and some of it crosses over to the other side. So that particular little trick in the optic chiasm causes some of the effects that we see with visual disorders. So it's pretty interesting, and it's unique to our nervous system. It's the only place where only part of the fibers cross over. So once the information reaches the primary visual cortex, which is in the occipital lobe, it stimulates neurons that discriminate the shape, size, and texture of objects. Information conveyed to the visual association cortex, so that's in the primary visual cortex. In the visual association cortex, the information is analyzed for colors and motion. So you first detect the shape, size, and texture of objects, and then it's analyzed for colors and motion. An action stream is a stream of visual information that flows dorsally and is used to direct movement. A perception stream is a stream of visual information that flows ventrally and is used to recognize visual objects. So what I want you to get out of this is it's not as simple as a light comes in and we know what it is. It's a very complex system. And there's lots of stuff going on with it. So disorders of the visual system can also be complex. So consequences of damage along that pathway, they call it the retino-genticulo-cortical pathway because it goes from the retina to the genicular nucleus in the thalamus to the cortex, and you have that synapse in the thalamus. They vary, the consequences vary according to the location of the lesion. So visual losses are described by referring to the visual field deficit. So we're going to say you have a right visual field deficit or a left visual field deficit or some combination. So when we're talking about optic nerve lesions, a complete interruption of the optic nerve results in ipsilateral blindness. Loss of direct pupillary light reflex. The optic nerve is entirely myelinated by oligodendrocytes and is frequently infected by multiple sclerosis. So a lot of times in MS, the first symptoms people have are visual symptoms. So picture number 1 up here is complete interruption of the optic nerve. So that is between the retina and the optic chiasm. So both streams of information from the right eye, in this particular example, are affected because the optic nerve is interrupted by whatever process. So visual loss is described by referring to the visual field deficit. A complete lesion of the retina or the optic nerve results in total loss of vision in the ipsilateral eye, so the same side. Bitemporal hemianopsia is loss of information to both temporal visual fields. So number 2 on this picture is bitemporal hemianopsia. So hemi means half and an means no, and opia or opsia, you'll see it both ways, means vision. So we have no vision on the temporal side of either eye. So we have the middle vision, but not the side vision. Homonymous hemianopia or hemianopsia is loss of visual information from the same visual field, right or left, in both eyes. So that's picture number 3 on here. So you lose the left side of the left eye and the left side of the right eye. And what this ends up manifesting as in a visual is you have a one-sided visual field cut. And so we'll look at some of the consequences of that. So this could be from a lesion in the cerebral cortex affecting the information coming from the right and the information coming from the left. Cortical blindness is where the person has no awareness of any visual information due to a lesion in the brain. So you could have the eye affected, the optic nerve affected, you could have the thalamus affected, you could have the cortex affected. So lots of different things in the stream can affect vision. There's a phenomenon that's called blind sight, and it's the ability of a cortically blind individual to orient, point to, or detect movements of visual objects because they still have the peripheral part, or really all of the vision system is considered central, but they still have the ventral part or the forward part of the system. They can actually orient to objects, but because the cortex can't recognize it, they don't have any vision. So really interesting, because the pathway is complex, you can get these different disorders. So in the next section, we're going to start talking about eye movements. So really it's very helpful to look at this set of diagrams and the lesions that go with them, so you can get a sort of an idea of what causes bitemporal versus homonymous hemianopia or hemianopsia.